In this week's episode, we interview Philippa Kaye, content creator, entrepreneur, storyteller, India travel expert, and author of Escape to India. She shared with us some of her insights from living and running a business in India as a Westerner for 15 years. We learned about the curiosity and sense of adventure that drove her to discover the real India. Throughout our conversation, we discussed the importance of having authentic travel experiences and sustainability in tourism. Philippa invites us to explore our motivations for traveling to a destination and what we seek to gain over just checking off an item on our bucket list.
While India may have elements of chaos, travel within the country can be described by the overarching principles of guest is God and the importance of accepting the unpredictable. We thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and thought that it deserved to be a two-part episode. Let's dive into part one and be sure to check out the show notes for further details about destinations we reference in the episode. Hope you enjoy the show.
Well, Philippa, as you know, you're definitely one of my travel inspirations as an entrepreneur, an author, an Indian travel expert, and a storyteller. So thank you again for coming on the show.
It's great to be here. Thank you. Great to be here from the jungles of central India, even. So, living the walk, as it were.
So how did a Yorkshire girl end up in India?
Totally by accident, which is the best thing, I think. I had done my degree down in London. I wanted to go and work a ski season. I went to work a ski season. I got carried away and did about 6. And then I decided it was time to come back to the UK and, get a proper job and all that kind of stuff. And I just happened to see an advert in the back of a magazine for somebody looking for a travel specialist. And I gave them a call and went down and met them that very day. And we all went out for lunch. And they had a company specializing in luxury tailor-made Africa holidays. They said they wanted to set up another travel company. They didn't know where to, but would I be interested? And I said, yeah, no problem. And then a few weeks later, they called me and said, we've decided on South India. And they had this whole policy that if you hadn't seen it, you couldn't sell it. So they just called me and said, we've decided on South India. Can you fly out next week? And that's what I did.
The rest is history. Your love of Indian culture and travel, I assume, evolved over time, or was it an instant connection?
I don't remember an instant connection as such. I think I got there and I was quite nervous. Not nervous because of India, but nervous because it was a new job. And, I'd never set up a travel company before, for anybody. And although they briefed me, it was a case of trying to find the right product. And I think I just had this, I've got to get this right kind of feeling. And then on that first trip, for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I didn't know what I was looking for as such, but I knew that I wasn't being shown what I was looking for. And I think that's where this sort of avid curiosity started, because I just started digging around and while, you're not showing me what I want, but where can I find the people who can show me what I want? And I just ended up talking to people and finding things. But I think the defining moment on that first trip, and it's the one thing from that first trip that really stuck out, was, I think I was sitting in a hotel and 25 years ago, I was visiting destinations that didn't have particularly good hotels at that time. And I was sitting in this hotel and just got chatting to a guy and said, I just don't feel that I'm being shown what this country can offer. And he just said, well, how about tomorrow you come out to my village? And he just took me out to his village the next day. And it was a village where I don't necessarily think they'd seen a white person before. And it was just beautiful and it was just natural. And this was pre-social media and there's no photographs of it. But I just lived in that moment. And there were these ladies sitting on a veranda and they had sandalwood paste on their faces because it's really good for complexion and really cooling apparently. And it was quite a hot time of year. And there was an old lady doing readings with conch shells, and all the kids got super excited, and people just wanted to take me into their homes and show me their homes. And there was no common language, but we were having conversations like, do you have children, and are they boys, as in, do they have, and all this sort of sign language. And it was just, that hospitality, that warmth, that real guest is God came through at that point. These people were just, to our eyes, they had very, very little. but they just wanted to give, and the chai walla was coming up and giving me chai, and the guy from the local food store was giving me food, and they refused to accept any money for it. They were just so honored that I was there. But actually for me it was the honor to be in that village and to witness that. And I think retrospectively that's the catalyst that started me doing the kind of travel that I do.
That really resonates with me as well. That authentic travel experience that you had in that village. I think Neshme could relate in Ecuador. I had a very similar experience that it was very eye-opening and humbling to a degree.
In that village, yeah. I mean, I think also the rest of it, and also at that time, people weren't talking about experiences. You went and saw a hotel. So I got to Cochin and I went and saw the hotels in Cochin and I did whatever had been designed as the standard sightseeing. And that's very much how travel, in terms of travel companies and things, was thought. You tended to have your sort of backpacker trail and people pitching up and just sort of wandering around and finding things. And then you'd got the very organized travel, but nobody really seemed to focus on the feelings and on the experiences and on the authenticity of it all at that time. And what's been quite interesting about this trip is that I've been revisiting an itinerary that I put together on that trip that was all about little homestays and authenticity. And 25 years ago, people weren't doing that, and so just revisiting that on this trip has been really amazing.
And also the contrast from 25 years ago, I'm sure things are wildly different, but then in a way the same, no? That hospitality. And I think, what did you reference? Guest is God.
Yeah, guest is God is the whole sort of Indian saying. Yeah, and that heartfelt hospitality is there. That's definitely there. And I think the more you get to more remote areas, the more apparent that becomes. Because there a lot of places now have really overdeveloped, and over tourism has become a big problem. And I think in those areas it's harder to find that genuine heartfelt hospitality in some ways. So I still think sort of getting out and being different and just being slightly more remote, you really do get a sense and find a sense of that original, that original experience that I had.
Philippa, I know that a lot of the blog posts that you have and a lot of the things that you recommend are, for people to really seek these like authentic travel experiences. But for example, for somebody who may have like a very limited amount of time somewhere, maybe not as much flexibility with work or something like that, what are some tips to still be able to experience things authentically with a very limited amount of time or itinerary?
I think there's sort of two or three things. And one is really think about what it is that you want to see, what it is that you want to experience. Are you really going to India for, is it architecture, or is it food, or is it the culture, or is it wildlife? Just really think about the reasons you particularly want to visit. And then, the trick is to really slow it down. People tend to think, if they've got a limited amount of time and they need to cram in too many places, and India it's very overwhelming. And if you're cramming in places and you're just going to somewhere and seeing some monuments and going to somewhere and seeing some monuments, you don't get a feeling of the place. You don't get to absorb it. You don't get to meet the people. And my whole sort of tagline for years now has been, monuments create the backdrop, but people create the experiences. So what I would say is, slow it down and find somewhere and some way of having people who can really show you the place and have time to absorb it. And again, it kind of comes back to, if you're rushing around the more touristy places, that's where you get harassed, and that's where you try and get forced into shops, and that's where the whole essence of the country for me has got lost. But if you just go to sort of slightly smaller places, particularly more boutique places, more homeroom places, where people actually have a passion for their own region and their own destination, and they really want to showcase that to you. So if you were, if somebody wanted to come in, for example, they had 8 days, I would almost suggest doing 2 places for 4 nights, because then get an understanding of the place, and you get to meet the people, and you have time to be curious, and you have time to go and wander around and go to the bazaars and try the food and chat to the people and get an understanding of what life is like here for them.
I think that's so well said. Being actually present while traveling. Nesh and I actually were having a conversation earlier today about how we find ourselves, everyone just constantly on your phone or disconnected, and then you're missing the real authentic experience of life that's going by. So I think especially as Westerners, it's that part of culture or a slower pace of life is something we really seek, or at least I seek when I'm traveling, and that could definitely be found in India. What recommendations or tips would you give for a Westerner trying to immerse themselves in Indian culture?
I mean, I always say sort of dress very respectfully, and India is changing now, you know, from how it was 25 years ago. But even so, I think there's a, you know, particularly if you're going to slightly more sort of offbeat and remote areas, but even, you know, in the main cities, I'd always say just dress very respectfully for the culture, because you're talking about a country of 1.4 billion people, you know, and people might not have seen Westerners before and things. And Indians have this thing about staring, and it's not rude and it's not intrusive, and it's just the part of their culture. So I always think to dress respectfully, you know, make sure you're dressed for you know the place that you're in. And another one is acceptance in a way. In a way, you just have to go with the flow. I once arranged a trip for a lady from America, and she was coming out for 4 months actually. And 1 week in every month, she wanted to visit a different ashram from a different place in India, and then spend 3 weeks traveling around that place in India. So I put the whole trip together for her, but she was trying to force it and she was trying to control it. And she'd phone me and say, well, bottles of water are 10 rupees in this hotel, but they're 40 rupees in that hotel. And I just don't know what I'm going to be paying for anything. And I'm like, doesn't matter. It's 10 rupees or 20 rupees. It's a bottle of water. It's a hotel, you know. And she just tried to fight every step of the way. And in the end, I flew down to meet her and just wandered around a village with her. And we got chai from the chai wallah. And she's like, well, how much is he going to charge me? And I'm like, it will be 10 rupees. It might be 20 rupees. It's not going to be, you know. And all of a sudden, she learned how to just go with it and accept it. And you know, yes, there is a degree of, you know, you do sort of need to be vigilant, but I think particularly in, you know, some of these beautiful little places where guest is God, people are so proud to show you, and just being able to just give a little and just let go a little and just, you know, lose that sense of needing to control every moment, I think is quite important.
I think for travel in general, I mean, that's so true. There's always going to be things that you can't predict, no matter how much you plan in advance, how much you check the weather.
Yeah, I mean, this trip now, I've been doing this for 25 years, and part of it has been planned, and part of it I just didn't have time to plan. And there are certain places that I've wanted to go to, and it hasn't happened. And so I've ended up somewhere else. Oh, look at this, my chai's arriving. I'm gonna love India, thank you. um, and you know, so I've ended up somewhere else, and you know, you have that initial, oh, but I wanted to go there. But actually, I've ended up somewhere else, and the experience I've had there has been absolutely amazing. You know, and I've met new people and I've learned new things, and that's happened 3 or 4 times on this trip. And it's just that whole, you know, being open to experiences and thinking, well, yeah, I did want to go there, but actually, I've ended up here, and something has happened that's been more extraordinary than I was wanting to go there for. You know, and that's what's been amazing. You know, I got to Calicut and I just made a throwaway comment. You know, I've never seen a Tayan performance. And Dr. Sri Kumar said, well, there's one tonight, 10 minutes down the road. And I went and sat up all night watching this extraordinary Tayan performance. You know, it's just leaving yourself open to those possibilities.
Yeah,
I think traveling's
definitely.
all about the journey, not necessarily the end destination. And I think that's exactly what you just said.
Yeah, 100%.
You lived in India for 15 years. Is that right?
Yeah, about that.
How would you say that that time evolved or shifted you as a person and as a traveler?
Again, it's kind of acceptance and not forcing things, and things happen in India and at their own pace, and you can't dictate that. And I actually had a really lovely conversation with a guy at a place I wasn't expecting to end up at about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And you learn more about the culture and you become much more accepting of the culture. And I was chatting with this guy, and Indian culture is very much, still the joint family. I know sort of brothers and sisters, sisters, brothers, brothers, even if, they may have a house that's big enough for them all to have their own bedroom, they will share bedrooms. There's this, all being together all the time kind of thing. Now, back in the West, particularly in the UK, you want your separate bedrooms and you want your own space, and that's really important. Um, and we just got chatting about that. And, I just said, well, yeah, perhaps if you're all living together all the time, you just become much more tolerant. And he just said, we prefer to call it accepting. We have acceptance. And I just love that. And I just thought, well, that just sums up that entire conversation, And I think you just become much more accepting of things and situations, and you learn that you can't dictate. And, this kind of Indian philosophy of, well, if it doesn't happen today, it'll happen tomorrow, and you can't get het up by the fact that something hasn't happened today. So I think there's that part of it. And I think there's also a much more people element to it. I had the luxury of time. I had the luxury of being here. If people invited me to go and see somewhere, I could go down there for 3 or 4 days. This is the kind of trip I'm doing at the moment, is the kind of trip I haven't had to do for 15, 16 years, when you've got to see a lot in a short space of time. So I think also living here just gave me that luxury of time, and I could go somewhere and then you could learn about it, and then you chat to people, and then you just find out a little bit more, and you get curious and you go and explore, and it just gives you that sense of having the time, the space to discover more and learn more and spend more time with people and just really learn from them.
Another loaded question for you. Being in India for 15 years, you've been able to see lots of parts of the country, not just your typical Golden Triangle. What are some of the areas that have changed you, or one of your favorite places to travel within India?
I've been talking about that so much this week, because how can you even begin to choose? It's extraordinary. And it's every state is different. Every state is completely different. It's almost like a different country. I've just been traveling the 3 southern states. It's not that they just don't speak the same language as each other. They have a different script even. The food is different. There's just a different vibe and feel about every different place. So, it is almost like traveling through different countries. Okay, this again comes down to the way that I talk about travel versus the way that most travel companies talk about travel. It's not where do you want to go? It's why do you want to go? What are your interests? What are your hobbies? What excites you about travel? Because India has something for everybody. I'm sitting now in the middle of Madhya Pradesh. It's the wildlife capital of India. There's 5 national parks here. I love Madhya Pradesh. I love the wildlife. I love, the colors here at sunrise and sunset, the people, the tribals. It's an amazing place. There are some amazing sites here as well, and it's much less known than the Golden Triangle and more touristy areas. So you have far fewer people. So it just becomes a much more exclusive experience. Coming up through Kerala, again, you've got regions that have been, destroyed by over tourism. That's quite a strong word. But what I did this time was what I did 20 odd years ago, which is go up through the Malabar region. And Kerala is extraordinary, and the food and the people, and you really, I mean, you do get a sense of it all over India, but particularly in Kerala, it's really heartfelt. The people that are showing you around. So Kerala is just extraordinary, and it's green and it's verdant, and it's got so many sort of different cultural aspects to it, and it's got the backwaters and the beaches, and but it's got Muslim influence, and it's got British influence as well, and it's got that Hindu influence, and it's just a real mishmash of all sorts of things going on, and it's very gentle. It's much more gentle than the rest of India. You go to Tamil Nadu, and it's just Dravidian culture and temples, and it's just extraordinary. And these mad temples, everywhere you go. You go up into the lower Himalayas, and you have this lovely hill culture there, and people up there are very gentle. But you just have incredible vistas. We have 8 of the highest peaks in the world are in India. So you have these beautiful mountain vistas and mountain cultures, and you have amazing trekking and whitewater rafting and adventure tourism. So there's a different place in India there's something for everybody in India. And it's that finding, well, it's not a case of, well, I've got to go and I've got to do the Golden Triangle because that's what everyone talks about. That's seeing a bunch of monuments, which gives you a tick list. Yeah, okay, we've done that. We've seen the Taj Mahal. But actually, why do you want to come here? What interests you about the country? What are your interests? What are your hobbies? You're into wildlife? Think about this place, and that's what it becomes for me. It's matching the person's interests. And I think as travel agents or tour operators or anybody who advises anybody on travel, you've really got to get to know your customer. You've really got to get to know that person. And once you know that person and you know what interests them, and if you know your product well enough, then you match together their their ideal holiday. And that's what becomes sort of truly tailor-made travel in a way. Not just you want to go to India, you've got to do the Golden Triangle. What's tailor-made about that? You're seeing a tick list. And you can do that, and that can be an add-on, but why do you want to go? Do you want to see the vibrancy of Mumbai? Are you really interested in textiles? Are you interested in different cultures? Are you interested in photography? And then anywhere in India can come to that. I mean, Calcutta is this mad, busy, vibrant city, but it's just really gentle and it's still remained very true to itself, and it's just really got a heart. You look at Mumbai and it's Bollywood and films and crazy, and it's every place has a different reason for visiting.
I think for a lot of people, the intimidating part is not knowing where to start, right? Or like who to go to, who to ask, right? You go online, you'll see the Taj Mahal, you see just the normal areas, but then it's like if you don't really have experience breaking outside of like the typical touristy areas, it's kind of a little intimidating. So I think definitely what you're doing, curating these really personalized experiences, it's so valuable because it does allow people to really see those things that they might have never found online or been able to reach.
Yeah, and I think as well, and I, there's a wonderful sort of oxymoron in what you just said, because people find it intimidating to try and find beyond or reach beyond the Golden Triangle. But actually, because of over tourism and because of how tourism is run in the Golden Triangle, to travel there is actually more intimidating than to get out to some of the slightly more offbeat places, which are just much more accommodating and much more gentle.
I think it's very full circle now that you're currently calling in from Madhya Pradesh. No. And that is where you spent lots of your time running a safari lodge, and also where you wrote your book, Escape to India. How does it feel being back?
Just amazing. And just I think earlier on you said, which is your sort of favorite place in India or whatever, and it's so hard to say. But there is just something magical about coming back to the jungles. The minute you get here and you just, Madhya Pradesh, the architecture is still very, very traditional, and you still have a lot of tribal culture, and you just have, amazing national parks and wildlife, and you're traveling around and you're meeting a lot of people sort of who are very like-minded. And I was trying to write something yesterday, and it's kind of like I'm almost bubbling with excitement because I'm back in Madhya Pradesh because it's so beautiful. But there's a sense of, you just also just kind of calm down. I know that I could just come to one of these places and just like I did previously, just sit here for months and just breathe.
So when you were there managing the lodge, how did you get there? Like what's the story behind that?
That was just a sort of really random thing. I was living in London. I was running a sort of luxury tailor-made travel company in London. Even then, so this was back in 2006, I was getting slightly frustrated because we were doing really sort of super high-end luxury travel, but for me, people weren't really experiencing, the true India. And an email came through, and it was from some people who own one of the lodges that we were using, and they needed a manager for the season. And I was just a bit fed up with London. And this email came through saying, did I know anybody who could come out and run the lodge for the season? And they needed somebody literally within 3 weeks. So I asked if I could take a sabbatical. I was told no. I said, I think I'm going to quit my job then. The it was like, well, let's talk about that sabbatical. And yeah, 3 weeks later, I was clearly without any sort of thought or concept of what I was walking into, ended up 3 weeks later in a lodge in managing a lodge in central India. Yeah.
Wow.
And just could not have expected. Yeah, I clearly hadn't thought it through.
And how long did you stay?
It's about 6 months. It was about 6 months. But just that real eye-opener of, I'd been a luxury travel agent, so I'd been chauffeured around the country and stayed in fantastic hotels and had guides and translators and everything that you have as you organize a holiday for someone, and when we would travel as if we were on that holiday, so you have your cars and your drivers and your guides, and you're really well looked after. And I was really well looked after in the lodge, but the whole difference in the experience was, this was 2006, and I didn't realize that the lodge didn't have electricity or running water, or there was definitely no Wi-Fi. So we had electricity when the power supply kicked in, which was for 4 hours on a morning, never on a Friday, because why would you have electricity on a Friday? And none of the staff spoke English, and they're all local tribal guys, and I spoke no Hindi. And so just to walk into that situation was challenging but incredible.
I can imagine. I feel like Ash and I had a very similar situation, just casually walking into the Amazon jungle for work without much thought too.
Your experience in India, or starting off, was the same, right? That initial draw was, wow, it was completely eye-opening, seeing this other way of life.
Yeah, completely. And as you say, and even now you go back into these villages, and a lot of the people are still living exactly the same, and it's and as you say, just happy, without all the accoutrements and trappings of the first world, as it were.
Absolutely. For me, you would think, or from the outside, you would think it'd be one of your biggest challenges living there, which it was, but also there was a beauty in it. What do you think was one of your biggest challenges through your 15 years living in India?
What you learn about when you live in India is it's when you're coming here as a travel agent, you're selling holidays here, you're working with India in that way. It's all about guest is God, and it's amazing and accommodating. I think as a single Western female living in Delhi and trying to run a business in Delhi, and just trying to figure out that side of things, and the bureaucracy and the logic and the and how to get all that kind of stuff done, that becomes much more of a challenge. So it just becomes a very different place in a way. You still travel, you still see these extraordinary places, but actually the whole concept of running a business here is just very, very different. And the mindset behind it is very different, and the complications behind it are very, very different. So I would say that became a huge challenge.
So Philippa, your company, Indian Experiences, focuses on wildlife, adventure, and sustainable curated travel. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? What are some of the tours that people can take?
I mean, basically, again, it's just for me to really try and get the real India, out to people. And just, this whole, as I mentioned before, this whole monuments create the backdrop, but people create the experiences. And it's just really looking at the whole holistic journey. So, I do fully understand that people do want to see the Golden Triangle. I get that. For me, I'd rather get them out of there, and visit the rest of India. But even within that, you can create lovely experiences. It doesn't have to be just about sort of going there, seeing a monument and moving on. So, what I do as part of my research is I'll go into a city, like an Agra or Jaipur, and I'll spend 24, 48 hours doing the standard sightseeing that gets offered by most companies. But then I'll spend another week there, and I'll dig and delve and find out, what else there is to do there. Jaipur, for example, is really famous for its blue pottery. It's really famous for its jewelry. 80% of the world's jewels at one time used to go through Jaipur. It's famous for the block printing and the textiles. It's really famous for. It's really lovely for sort of half-day treks. It's got some beautiful old markets. There's sort of adventure tourism there as well. So it's a case of so then you can offer the standard destinations, but again, truly tailor it to what somebody's looking for. I'm working on an itinerary at the moment, and it was just brilliant. This, couple contacted me, and they have a restaurant that they run, and they just said, well, we've been told not to ask you about the Golden Triangle, but what we'd really like to do is a culinary tour. We're really interested in food. I'm really interested in different breads. My wife's really interested in pickles and sauces. But can we kind of do it around the Golden Triangle? And you just go, great, because actually, Delhi, the food's very much influenced by Punjabi influence, and then you go to Agra and it's all UP, and you go to Jaipur and it's Rajasthani food. So the three types of food are very, very different. And you can do everything from street food walks to dining with royal families. So you can create, even around a mainstream destination, you can create fantastic experiences. But then, for me, over and above that, it's all about showcasing this extraordinary country.